The afternoon light filtered through the wide glass windows of the Milford Square shopping center, painting long golden rectangles across the polished floor. People moved in all directions, carrying bags, talking on phones, laughing with each other. Nobody paid attention to the young woman moving slowly through the crowd with her hand pressed gently against the side of her round belly. Sofia Ramirez was 27 years old, and she was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun that had started the morning neat, but had given up somewhere around noon. She wore a pale blue dress that stretched over her stomach, and a pair of flat sandals that had seen better days. The strap on the left one was held together with a thin strip of clear tape that she hoped nobody would notice. Her bag was old, and the zipper stuck, and she carried it over one shoulder like a woman who had learned not to complain about small things because the big things took all of her energy. She stopped in front of a store. It's called Little Wonders. The window display was full of tiny clothes hanging on small wooden hangers, soft stuffed animals arranged in a little scene, and a banner that read New Arrivals. Sofia stared at it for a moment and then placed both hands on her belly the way she always did when she needed courage. The baby moved, a slow roll that she felt in her whole body. And she smiled the kind of smile that nobody could take from her. She pushed open the glass door and walked inside. The store smelled like something clean and soft, like powder and cotton and new beginnings. Soft music played from somewhere above. The shelves were organized and cheerful, and full of things that made her heart both warm and ache at the same time. She picked up a small white onesie with a yellow duck on the front and held it up to the light. It was soft and simple and cost less than her bus fare home. She placed it carefully in her basket. She moved through the aisles slowly, touching things gently, reading prices, doing quiet math in her head. A set of small socks, a lightweight blanket the color of sky, a tiny knit hat with a little pom-pom on top. Each item she chose was modest, but chosen with so much love that it might as well have been gold. She held each piece for a moment before placing it in the basket. As though she was introducing herself to the life that was coming, she reached a low shelf near the back of the store and crouched carefully to look at a set of bundled washcloths. She had just reached for them when she heard it. A laugh, loud, easy, confident. The kind of laugh that fills a room without being invited. She did not need to look up to know. She knew that laugh the way you know the sound of a door that sticks in your old apartment. By the feeling it leaves in your chest before your brain even registers it. She stood slowly and turned. Derek. Whitman walked into Little Wonders like he owned the building and 3 others nearby. He was tall and well-dressed in a light gray blazer and dark trousers, with a watch on his wrist that cost more than Sofia's monthly rent. His hair was cut fresh, and his shoes were spotless. He was the kind of man who always looked like he had just come from somewhere important and was about to go somewhere even more important. Beside him was a woman with straight blonde hair and a dress that fit like it had been sewn onto her body. She was laughing at something Derek had just said and touching his arm with the casual ease of someone who had never once worried about money or been left alone. Derek's eyes found Sofia almost immediately. For 1 second, there was nothing on his face. Then came the smile.
Smell warm.
The kind of smile that carries a message behind it. He walked toward her with his girlfriend at his side, unhurried, like a man strolling through a park. Sofia held her basket a little tighter and breathed through her nose. "Well?" Derek said, stopping a few feet from her and looking her up and down with an expression that sat somewhere between amusement and contempt. "I didn't expect to see you here." Sofia kept her voice steady. "I'm buying things for the baby." "Excuse me?" She took a step to the side. He moved slightly, not blocking her completely, but enough to make the intention clear. "Buying things," he repeated, glancing into her basket. His girlfriend leaned over to look too, and her lips curved into a thin smile. "Sofia, come on. Dollar store washcloths and a onesie with a duck on it. Is that what my son is going to come home in?" "He's not your son," Sofia said quietly. "You signed away that right when you walked out." Derek's jaw tightened, but the smile stayed in place. the way a mask stays even when the face beneath it shifts. I walked out because you gave me no choice, because you were stubborn and irrational, and you refused every reasonable offer I made. Reasonable, Sophia repeated, and there was no anger in her voice. Only a flatness that said she had already lived through every version of this conversation and had nothing left to prove. The girlfriend tilted her head and looked at Sophia with an expression of theatrical sympathy. Honestly, Derek was more than generous. Most men would have just disappeared. He did disappear, Sophia said simply, and looked back at Derek. If you have legal matters to discuss, contact my friend Priya. She knows how to reach me. We're done here. She moved a step around him again, and this time he let her go. But he spoke to her back. You can pretend all you want, he said, his voice dropping just low enough to be private, sharp enough to land. But when this baby comes, and the bills stack up, and you're lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering how you're going to manage, you'll remember this conversation, and I'll be ready. I will take that child, Sophia. I have the resources, and I have the lawyers, and you have nothing. So enjoy your little duck onesie. Sophia stopped. She did not turn around. She stood very still, and the whole store seemed to hold its breath. Then she walked to the register. She set the basket on the counter. Her hands were trembling, and she hid them in the fabric of her dress. The woman at the register, young, with kind eyes and a small silver hoop in her ear, gave her a look that said she had heard everything. Sophia gave her a small nod and began placing items on the counter one by one. That's enough. The voice came from somewhere behind her. It was a man's voice, low and clear and completely calm. Somehow made it louder than any shout. Sophia turned along with everyone else in the store. A man stood near the entrance. He was tall, with dark hair that was slightly longer than formal, and a charcoal jacket that had clearly been expensive, but was worn without ceremony. His face was composed, but his eyes were sharp and dark and fixed on Derek Whitman like someone who had already made a decision and was simply carrying it out. What? Derek said, and there was confusion in his voice because this man did not seem uncertain or aggressive. He just seemed decided. I said that's enough, the man repeated, walking forward a few steps. You've been standing in a public store, humiliating a pregnant woman for the last 4 minutes. I don't know what your disagreement is, and I don't need to. Whatever it is, this is not the place, and this is not the way. Derek straightened. I don't know who you are, but this is a private matter. A private matter you chose to conduct at full volume, the man said evenly. You're done. It was not a question or a suggestion. The people in the nearby aisles had gone quiet. The girlfriend shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Derek looked at the man for a long moment, and something in the other man's gaze seemed to settle the calculation for him. Derek looked at Sophia. We'll finish this conversation another time, he said. And his voice had lost its edge. He put his hand on his girlfriend's back and they walked out. The door swung shut. Sophia exhaled. The cashier let out a quiet breath. Someone 2 aisles over started moving again. Sophia turned back to the register and the man came and stood, a few feet beside her. Not crowding her, just present. Thank you, she said, not looking at him directly. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine, she said. It was mostly true. She handed over her card and watched the screen with the focus of someone who needed the number to be correct. It was correct. She exhaled again. The cashier packed her items into a small paper bag with handles and handed it over. Sophia picked up the bag and turned to leave. The man was near the door and he held it open for her without making a thing of it. Outside in the open air of the shopping corridor, she stopped and adjusted the bag on her arm. She could hear her own heartbeat slowly calming down. She glanced back through the glass. The man was at the register. He was saying something to the cashier. Then he handed something over, something small and flat, and turned to go. Sophia moved toward the exit. She did not know why she felt the way she felt. Not grateful exactly, though she was that. Something quieter. Something she had not felt in a very long time. The feeling of being seen by someone who expected nothing back. That night, she sat on her bed in the small apartment she rented by the week, and she took each item out of the paper bag, one at a time. The onesie with the duck, the tiny socks, the sky-colored blanket, the little hat with the pom-pom. She laid them all out on the quilt and looked at them in the warm yellow light of her bedside lamp. The baby turned inside her. She put her hand on the place where she felt him and said very softly, "We're going to be fine, little one. I promise you we are going to be fine." She folded each item carefully and placed them in the small plastic drawer she had set aside for him. She did not know yet that the man at the store had paid for every single thing in that bag. She would find out tomorrow when Priya called her after running into the cashier at the coffee shop next door. When she found out, she sat down on the kitchen floor and cried for a long time, not from sadness, but from the strange, aching relief of realizing that a stranger had been kind to her without wanting anything at all. She did not know his name. She did not know that his name was Ethan Cole, or that he had driven home that evening in silence and told his driver Thomas to find out who she was. She did not know that he sat in his wide, quiet office that night and thought about a woman holding a basket of small soft things with trembling hands, a chin that would not go down. She only knew that for the first time in months. When she turned off the light and pulled the blanket to her chin, she did not feel completely alone. 3 days passed after the baby store. Sophia spent them the way she spent most of her days now, moving carefully between the small routines that kept her life from falling apart. She made oatmeal in the morning because it was cheap and filling. She walked slowly around the block twice because the doctor said movement was good. She sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and a pen and wrote down numbers. Income, expenses, the small gap between them that she was always trying to close. She called Priya in the evenings and they talked about ordinary things because ordinary things were sometimes the only medicine that worked. On the 4th morning, she had her prenatal checkup at the Millfield Women's Health Clinic on the corner of Broad and 5th. She took the bus because the clinic was 20 minutes away and her old car had stopped working 2 months ago and she had not had the heart or the money to deal with it yet. She sat near the window on the bus with her bag on her lap and watched the city go by. The coffee shops opening their doors, the delivery trucks double parked, the school children in bright backpacks walking in loose clusters, all of it ordinary and alive and completely indifferent to whatever was happening inside her. The appointment went well. The doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Fiona Gregg, with reading glasses and very steady hands, pressed her stethoscope to Sophia's belly and listened, and then smiled the professional smile of someone who genuinely means it. The baby was growing well. His heartbeat was strong. He had turned slightly in the last week, which was good, she said. He seemed in a hurry, she added, which made Sophia laugh for the first time in days. She came out of the clinic into the gray mid-morning light with a folder of papers and a small card for her next appointment in 4 weeks. She stood on the top step of the clinic entrance and put the folder into her bag and the bag onto her shoulder and looked up at the sky where clouds were moving fast and low like they had somewhere to be. She did not see him immediately. She was looking for the bus stop. Then she did. Ethan Cole was leaning against the side of a dark car parked at the curb across the street. He was not wearing a jacket today, only a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow and dark trousers. His hands were in his pockets. He was not looking at his phone or checking the time. He was simply standing there, watching the clinic entrance with the patience of someone who had decided to wait and had made peace with however long that would take. When their eyes met, he straightened, but did not move toward her. He waited. Sophia crossed the street slowly. She stopped a few feet from him and looked at him directly. "You paid for my things at the store," she said. "Yes," he said. There was no apology in his voice and no performance of generosity. Just acknowledgement. "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know," he said. She studied him. He had a calm face, not blank, calm, like someone who had learned the difference between reacting and responding and had chosen the second one a long time ago. There were small things about him that didn't match the expensive car behind him. The shirt had no logo. His watch was plain. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that looked old. "How did you know I had an appointment here?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I asked Thomas, my driver, to find out a little about you after what happened at the store." I wanted to know you were safe. That's all. Sophia felt something tighten in her chest. It was not fear exactly. It was something more complicated, the feeling of being looked for, which she had not felt in so long that she had almost forgotten what it was. That's an unusual thing to do, she said. Yes, he agreed. I know it probably seems like too much. If you want me to go, I will. She looked at him for another moment. The baby moved, a slow stretch that pushed against her ribs. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. I need to get to the bus stop, she said. I can drive you, he said. No obligation. You can get out wherever you want. The clouds overhead were moving faster now, and the wind had picked up. Sophia looked at the bus stop down the block, at the small plastic shelter with 3 people already waiting under it, at the gray sky promising rain. She looked back at him. Fine, she said. Thank you. He opened the back door for her and she got in. The car was warm and quiet inside. Thomas, an older man with a gray beard and a courteous way of moving, greeted her briefly and then focused on the road. Ethan got in on the other side, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. For the first few minutes, nobody said anything. Sophia looked out the window. The city moved past in its usual, unremarkable way. How was the appointment? Ethan asked. She glanced at him. He was looking forward, not at her. The question had not been small talk. It sounded like a real question. Good, she said. He's healthy. Strong heartbeat. Ethan said, and there was something in his voice when he said it. Something that had moved before he could stop it. Yes, Sophia said. A boy. Ethan nodded. He looked out his window for a moment. When he looked back, his expression was composed again, but she had caught that brief, unguarded thing and filed it. Away without knowing why, they talked slowly after that. Sophia did not plan to talk. It simply happened the way some conversations do, one honest thing leading to another. She told him about the prenatal visits, the cost of them, the strange mix of joy and terror that came with each one. She told him about the job she had been suspended from when she could no longer stand for 8 hours at a time, and the small freelance bookkeeping work she had found online that kept her barely above the line. She did not say it as complaint. She said it the way practical people state facts, clearly without drama. He listened. He did not offer solutions or interrupt with advice. He just listened and occasionally asked a question. That told her he had actually heard what she said. When the car pulled up in front of her building, she reached for the door handle and then paused. Can I ask you something? She said, Yes, he said. Why do you care? You don't know me. You saw me in a store for 10 minutes. Most people would have minded their own business. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the first drops of rain began to tap against the windshield. I saw someone being treated as though they were less than they are, he said. And I know what that does to a person. It strips something away. I didn't want to watch that happen and do nothing. Sophia looked at him carefully. You said you know what it does to a person. Did something happen to you? He met her eyes, and for a second, she saw something there that was very old and very heavy. Yes, he said simply. A long time ago. She did not push. She nodded and opened the door and stepped out into the light rain. Sophia, he said. She turned. My name is Ethan, he said. Ethan Cole. She looked at him for a moment. I know, she said. Priya looked you up. Something that was almost a smile crossed his face. Of course she did. Sophia turned and walked to her building. She did not look back, but she heard. The car stayed parked until she was inside. That evening, she was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile. Tea and a half-finished crossword from a newspaper she had. Found in the laundry room when there were 3 sharp knocks at her door. She knew before. She reached the door. She opened it, and Derek was standing in the hallway in his expensive coat with his collar turned up. Behind him was a man she did not recognize, older, in a dark suit, carrying a briefcase. We need to talk, Derek said, stepping forward. No, Sophia said, and she did not move from the doorway. Derek's eyes narrowed. Sophia, this is formal. This man is my attorney. We have paperwork, can send any legal documents through the proper channels, she said, keeping her voice flat. You do not get to show up at my home at 8 o'clock at night. I do when the matter involves my child, he said, and his voice had dropped into that particular register she recognized. Controlled and cold and dangerous in the way quiet things can be dangerous. She held the door steady. Her heart was hammering, but her face was still. Leave, she said. Sophia, he said, and he placed one hand flat on the door, not pushing, just resting there. I have legal standing now. My attorney filed preliminary papers this afternoon. We are moving forward with a formal custody evaluation. You should think very carefully about how you handle the next few weeks, because a judge is going to look at your situation and compare it to mine, and you need to be reasonable. The baby kicked hard, and she pressed her hand to her side without thinking. Derek looked at her hand and then looked at her face, and something moved in his expression that she could not quite read. Before she could respond, there were footsteps on the stairs, and then Ethan appeared at the end of the hallway. He was still in his shirt from earlier. He had a paper bag in one hand, the kind from the grocery, a few blocks away. He took in the scene without breaking stride, and when he reached the door, he stopped beside Sophia and looked at Derek with an expression of complete steadiness. Is there a problem? Ethan said, and his voice was exactly as calm as it had been in the baby store. Derek stared at him. Who are you? Someone who is standing here, Ethan said. Is there a problem? The attorney beside Derek shifted his briefcase from one hand to the other. Derek looked at Sophia, then back at Ethan. A long calculation happened behind his eyes. We're not finished. Derek said to Sophia. Yes, you are, Ethan said quietly. Another moment passed. Then Derek straightened his coat, gave Ethan one last measuring look, and nodded to his attorney. They walked back down the hallway and down the stairs in the front. Door of the building opened and shut. Sophia let out a breath that had been sitting in her chest for what felt like several minutes. She looked at Ethan. What are you doing here? He held up the paper bag. You mentioned chamomile tea this afternoon. I was passing the grocery. Paused. I realized that sounds strange. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door. Come in, she said. He came inside and set the bag on the counter, and she sat back down at the table. And he sat across from her without being asked. The rain was heavier now against the window. The small kitchen lamp made a warm circle of yellow light. He filed custody papers, she said. I heard, Ethan said. I don't have a lawyer. I can't afford one. I know someone, he said. Her name is Rachel Burns. She is the best family law attorney in this state, and she owes me a favor. She will take your case. Sophia looked at her hands on the table. I don't want charity. It's not charity, he said. It's a favor passed forward, and your son deserves the best defense available. That's not about you and me. That's just true. She was quiet. Outside, the rain came steadier. Why do you keep showing up? She said, not accusing, genuinely asking. He folded his hands on the table. For a moment, he was very still. Had a wife, he said. Her name was Claire. We had a son. He was 2 years old. His name was James. He stopped and looked at a point on the table between them. They were in an accident 4 years ago. I lost both of them on the same day. Sophia did not say anything. She did not reach for something comforting to fill the silence. She let it be what it was. After that, I stopped, he said. I stopped most things. I worked, I traveled, I functioned, but I stopped being present in any real way, and I was fine with that. I had decided it was the right way to live what was left. He looked up at her. Then I walked into a baby store and I saw a woman, being told she was worth nothing, and she stood there and held her ground, and didn't break, and I felt something move in a place I had decided was closed. The rain tapped at the glass. I'm sorry about Claire and James, Sophia said softly. Thank you, he said, and he meant it fully. They sat together in the small kitchen while the rain came down and the lamp held its circle of light, and neither of them needed to say anything more to understand that something had shifted Between them that could not be shifted back, the letter from Derek's attorney arrived on a Tuesday in a stiff white envelope with a law firm's name printed in dark ink across the top left corner. Sophia stood at her mailbox in the lobby of her building and held it in both hands for a moment before opening it. The legal language inside was careful and formal and amounted to this: Derek Whitman was formally initiating a petition for full physical custody of the child upon birth, citing financial instability and lack of adequate living conditions on the part of the mother. She folded the letter and put it back in the envelope and carried it upstairs and set it on the kitchen table and stood looking at it for a while. Then she called Priya. "Read it to me," Priya said. Sophia read it. There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then Priya said, very clearly, "That man is going to regret this." Sophia almost smiled. "I need a lawyer, Priya." "Call Ethan," Priya said immediately. "I know," Sophia said. She called him. He answered on the second ring, and she read him the letter, and by the time she finished, he was already calm in a way that told her he had been thinking about this possibility since the night Derek had shown up at her door. "Rachel Burns," he said. "I'll call her today. She'll be in touch with you before the end of the week." Rachel Burns called the next morning at 9. She had a brisk voice and an unhurried manner, and she asked Sophia precise questions and listened to the answers, and at the end she said, "He doesn't have a case. He signed an informal separation agreement, and there are texts and emails that establish abandonment. We're going to be fine. Don't open any more letters from his office. Send them to me." Sophia set her phone on the table after the call and sat down heavily in her kitchen chair and pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. That afternoon, Ethan came over. It was the first time he had come to her apartment without a crisis pulling him there, and the difference in it was noticeable in the way he stood at the door, slightly less certain, as if crisis gave him permission and its absence required something else. She let him in and made tea. And they sat at the kitchen table, which had become their table, without anyone deciding it. Rachel called. Sophia said, "Good," he said. She said, "We'll be fine." "You will be," he said. Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug and looked at him. He was looking at the table, and there was something careful about him today, something held. "What happened after you lost them?" she asked. She had been wanting to ask this since the night he told her, and she had waited because it needed to come naturally. He looked up. He seemed to consider the question not as intrusion, but as something real that deserved a real answer. "The first year I don't remember very well," he said. "That sounds dramatic, but it's accurate. I functioned. I made decisions. I ran the company. But there's very little I actually remember clearly. It was like living through frosted glass." "After the first year?" she asked. "I got very good at being busy," he said. "I traveled for work constantly. I expanded the company into 2 new markets in 18 months. I filled every hour, and I told myself that was enough, that I was handling it. Were you?" she asked. "No," he said. "I was just making sure I was never still long enough to feel it." Sophia was quiet for a moment. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle and rested across the kitchen table between them. "I used to do something similar," she said. "When things with Derek started going wrong, I just kept being busy, kept making plans, kept thinking if I did enough, tried hard enough, it would become what I needed it to be." She paused. "It took a long time to understand that I was working very hard to hold together something that was already gone." He looked at her with an attention that made her want to keep talking. "When he left," she said, "my first feeling was not sadness. It was shame. Because I had let myself get so far into something that wasn't right. I hadn't left, and I thought that said something about me. Something I didn't want to be true." "What do you think it says now?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "That I love something very much, even when it stopped deserving it. That's not weakness. I just didn't know that then." Ethan was quiet. He turned his mug slowly in his hands. "Claire would have liked you," he said finally. It came out simply, not as a compliment designed to land a certain way, just as a true thing he had thought and decided to say. Sophia felt the weight of those words. She did not make them smaller by brushing them off. "Thank you," she said. "That means a great deal." He spent the rest of the afternoon without crisis or urgency. He stayed for dinner, and Sophia made pasta with what she had in the cabinet. And it was nothing fancy, but they sat at the table and talked. The hours passed with a quality she had forgotten was possible. Unhurried, easy, real. He washed the dishes without being asked. And she dried them, and they stood side by side at the small sink, and it was so ordinary and so unexpectedly right that she had to look away for a moment to compose. Herself 2 weeks passed. Rachel Burns sent a letter to Derek's attorney that apparently landed with considerable force because Derek went quiet. No more knocks at the door. No more letters. Priya said she had heard through someone who knew someone that Derek had been advised by his own attorney that his case was very weak and that pursuing it would likely embarrass him publicly given the paper trail of his departure. Sophia did not celebrate. She simply exhaled and made another cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window and watched the street below. Ethan came to see her most days now, sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer. They had not defined anything. Neither of them reached for definitions. They were both people who had been hurt by things moving too fast in the wrong direction, and they understood without saying it. What was between them deserved patience. He brought her small things. A book she had mentioned once in passing. A particular kind of apple she had said was her favorite. A small potted plant for her windowsill, because she had once said the apartment felt too bare. He never made a presentation of these things. He simply set them down and moved on. She began to look forward to the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. On a Thursday evening in late autumn, 37 weeks into her pregnancy, Sophia woke from a light sleep on the couch with a sharp sensation that moved through her lower back and wrapped around to the front, and took her breath away. She sat up and waited. It came again, 4 minutes later, stronger. She called Priya first. Then she called Ethan. He answered immediately. "The baby," she said. "I'm coming," he said. He was at her door in 11 minutes. Thomas drove them to the hospital, and Ethan sat beside Sophia in the back seat, and she held his hand through the contractions, and he let her hold it without flinching, and talked to her in a steady, low voice about completely ordinary things, the weather, a film he had seen, the apple tree in the courtyard of his building, anything to keep her breathing, anything to keep her present. Priya met them at the hospital. The nurses moved efficiently and kindly. Dr. Gregg arrived within the hour. It was a long night. Ethan stayed in the waiting room, and Priya went back and forth between him and Sophia. At 3 in the morning, Priya came out and sat beside Ethan, and they did not talk much. Just sat the way people sit when they are waiting for something that matters. At 4:42 in the morning, a nurse came out and told Ethan that Sophia was asking for him. He stood. The room was dim and quiet. Sophia was propped against pillows, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face exhausted and luminous in the particular way of people who have just come through something enormous. In the crook of her arm was a small bundle wrapped in a pale blue cloth. She looked up when Ethan came in. Her eyes were wet, and she was smiling the way people smile when words would not be adequate even if they existed. "Come here," she said softly. He came to the side of the bed and looked down at the baby. He was small and pink, and his eyes were shut tight, and his tiny hands were curled under his chin, as if he had opinions about the world already and was keeping them to himself for now. "Do you want to hold him?" Sophia asked. Ethan looked at her. Something was happening in his face that he was not trying to hide or control. His eyes had gone bright. He held out his arms carefully, and Sophia placed the baby into them. The baby's weight was nothing, a handful of warmth and breath, and Ethan stood very still, holding him the way you hold something that is both precious and fragile and completely real. The baby made a small sound and shifted and did not wake. Ethan looked down at him, and the thing that had been locked in Ethan's chest for 4 years, the grief and the absence and the careful frozen space he had built around himself, moved. It did not break. It did not shatter dramatically. It simply loosened, the way ice loosens in early spring, slowly and quietly with warmth. He looked at Sophia over the baby's head. "What's his name?" he asked. "I was thinking," she said, and her voice was soft and careful, "about something simple, strong, something with meaning." She paused. "I was thinking about calling him James." Ethan went very still. "If that's all right," Sophia said quickly. "If that feels wrong, I will choose something else entirely. I just thought, because of what you told me, and because of who you are, and because this little person deserves a name that carries something worth carrying." Ethan looked down at the baby named James. A tear moved down his face, and he did not wipe it away. "It's perfect," he said. His voice was barely a sound. "It's exactly right." Sophia reached out and placed her hand on his arm, and they stood like that in the quiet room with the baby between them and the first pale light of morning beginning, at the window and the whole long road of everything that had happened, the humiliation in the store, the lonely nights, the threats, the grief that Ethan had carried alone for years, all of it gathered and present and somehow transformed by the small breathing weight in Ethan's arms into something that felt, against all probability, like a beginning. James curled his fingers around Ethan's thumb without waking. The grip was instinctive and complete. The grip of someone who did not yet know anything about the world, but had already decided to hold on. And Ethan held on too. Outside, the city began its morning. Buses pulled away from curbs. Coffee shops unlocked their doors. People walked to work in their coats with their breath making small clouds in the cold air. The world moved in its ordinary way, entirely unaware that in a quiet room on the 4th floor of Millfield General Hospital, 2 broken people and 1 brand new person were discovering that sometimes the things that undo you and the things that rebuild you arrive wearing each other's faces, and the only way to know the difference is to stay long enough to find out. Sophia looked at Ethan, and Ethan looked at Sophia, and neither of them said anything more because there was nothing left that needed saying. There was only James in the morning and the slow, real, unhurried beginning of something neither of them had believed they would ever find again.